How Mossad agents sat just seats, away from a Hamas commander on a train to Rome, waiting for the moment. The morning fog over Milan Centrale station clung to the platforms like a thin veil, hiding the tension that pulsed beneath the everyday rush of commuters. At 08:37, the high-speed Frecciarossa to Rome opened its doors, and among the crowd, stepping aboard were two people who looked as unremarkable as the dozens around them, an older Italian couple returning from a weekend trip. At least that's how they appeared. In reality, they were Yael and Eitan, Mossad field operatives whose soft voices and stroller slow walk were part of a carefully crafted disguise. Their target had arrived minutes earlier through a side entrance. Khalid al-Masri, a low-profile Hamas logistics commander known in intelligence dossiers simply as Sinai Channel. He rarely traveled by plane, rarely slept twice in the same city, and never used a digital device directly linked to him. But the Mossad had tracked him for months, mapping patterns in the chaos he thought protected him. A meeting in Rome, whose purpose was still unknown, was the first concrete lead in weeks. Al-Masri wore a dark jacket, hood raised, a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He moved with the slow confidence of someone convinced he was invisible. He chose Carriage 7, a quiet section preferred by business travelers. That was exactly the plan. Mossad had arranged to buy out a cluster of seats around him through intermediaries, ensuring controlled proximity without alerting him. Yael and Eitan boarded separately, blending into the flow of passengers. Yael held a newspaper in one hand, her reading glasses hanging loosely around her neck. Eitan carried a canvas bag filled with travel brochures and gum, props for the role of a fussy, retired husband. Neither made eye contact with the other, but their paths converged naturally toward Carriage 7. Inside the train, the ambience hummed with soft conversation and suitcase wheels bumping over the aisle. Al-Masri sat in Seat 07B beside the window. He placed his satchel between his legs, guarding it with a subtle but unmistakable instinct. That bag, Mossad intel suggested, contained either encrypted documents or a burner, device used for covert communication with cells across Europe. Yael took seat 09A, 2 rows ahead, aisle side. Eitan sat across from her, seat 09C, grumbling about leg space to complete the civilian act. Neither looked back at Al-Masri, but they didn't need to. A micro-camera disguised as a button on Yael's jacket was already streaming to a support team, positioned in an unmarked van outside the station. Another agent, posing as a conductor, had joined the train staff only for this journey. Everything was in motion. At 8:45, the train doors beeped and shut. A long, smooth acceleration pushed everyone gently back into their seats. The mission had officially begun. Sri opened his satchel just enough to slip a folded document inside his jacket. Yael's camera captured the motion. Eitan, pretending to stretch his legs, scanned the carriage again. No unusual movement, no counter-surveillance signs, but the true danger was still ahead. Rome was 3 hours away, and somewhere between Milan and the capital, the Mossad would have to make its move. Quietly, cleanly, invisibly. The train had settled into a steady rhythm, the rhythmic clatter over the tracks creating a kind of hypnotic background noise. For most passengers, it was the lull of travel. Some read newspapers, others scrolled on their phones, and a few dozed, lulled by the gentle sway. But for Yael and Eitan, every second was a high-stakes chess move, every breath measured, every glance calculated. Yael adjusted her reading glasses, pretending to study the crossword puzzle in her newspaper, while her eyes flicked toward a seat 07B. Al-Masri remained engrossed in his own world, occasionally glancing around with a faint suspicion, as though he could sense the invisible net tightening around him. Mossad training had taught them to detect that subtle body language, the slight tensing of shoulders, the narrowing of eyes, the faint hesitation before reaching into a bag. Eitan, pretending to fumble with a travel brochure, had already memorized the positions of every camera, every passenger of potential interest, and every exit on the carriage. His casual stretching movements were a ruse, keeping him relaxed while allowing him to subtly monitor the entire carriage. If Al-Masri made a move, Eitan had a split second to warn. Yael threw a tiny vibration in her watch, a discreet communication channel designed for moments just like this. The real challenge wasn't just keeping tabs on Al-Masri, it was doing so without alerting him. Mossad operations were never about brute force. They were about blending in so completely that the target assumed he was untouchable. The agents counted on the ordinary, on the mundane, the rustling of newspapers, the clatter of coffee cups, the hum of the train's engines. Every mundane gesture became a tool in their arsenal. Yael subtly shifted her position, angling her body so the micro-camera pinned to her jacket could capture Al-Masri's satchel from an unobtrusive angle. In it, the support team hoped to identify anything that would reveal his plans, locations or contacts. Over the headset in her ear, a calm voice from the control van relayed updates. Background noise blending into the hum of the train. "He's moving toward the aisle," the voice whispered. "Maintaining distance. Keep visual." Al-Masri's movements were slow but deliberate. At one point, he opened a notebook and began writing in Arabic, pausing after every line to scan the carriage. Yael's pulse quickened. Every detail mattered. The type of pen, the angle of the writing, the slightest adjustment of his bag. This was surveillance in its purest, most precise form: observation, patience, and timing. Eaton's eyes met hers briefly across the aisle, a silent confirmation. Everything was going according to plan. But he could see the tension in her jaw, the tight grip on the newspaper. They were professionals, but even the best agents felt the weight of what they were about to undertake. One misstep, one sudden movement, and the operation could unravel entirely. For 3 hours, the train would carry them closer to Rome, and closer to a moment that had been planned down to the second. Every movement, every glance, every heartbeat had a purpose. They were sitting mere seats away from a man whose life, and the lives of many others, depended on nothing going wrong. And as the Italian countryside blurred past the windows, the agents remained still, invisible and unflinching, ready for the moment when observation would become action. The train had been humming steadily for over an hour, the landscape outside a patchwork of vineyards, rolling hills and sleepy Italian towns. Inside carriage 7, tension had replaced the hum of mundane travel. Yael and Eitan had maintained their calm disguises for now, but the operation was teetering on a knife's edge. Al-Masri had grown restless. He shifted in his seat, subtly repositioning his satchel, and scanning the carriage more frequently. He had already sensed, just faintly, that something was off. In Mossad training, they called this the target's sixth sense, a subtle intuition that something unseen is tracking them. One wrong move and suspicion could spiral into panic. Yael's fingers tightened around the edge of her newspaper, hiding the micro-camera button embedded in her sleeve. Eitan fumbled with his brochure, pretending to adjust a train schedule, while his eyes flicked from the aisle to the emergency exit. The carriage, which had once felt empty, now seemed like a stage crowded with invisible actors. Then it happened. A man in a dark coat entered the carriage at the next stop, moving with an almost predatory curiosity. He paused mid-aisle, scanning the passengers with too keen an interest. His eyes lingered on Al-Masri, and then flicked over the rows where Yael and Eitan sat. Yael's heart raced. That was not part of the plan. The man carried no badge, no luggage, nothing that explained his presence, yet he radiated purpose. Eitan's subtle hand gesture, a slight tap on the knee, warned Yael that the situation had escalated. Their calm surveillance had just been threatened by an unknown variable. Al-Masri's attention sharpened. He leaned back slightly, as if sensing the man's scrutiny. The satchel moved instinctively closer to his body. Every muscle in Yael's body tensed. One misstep now, and all the months of planning could collapse. The intruder lingered for seconds that stretched into lifetimes, then just as suddenly moved toward the next carriage. It was impossible to tell whether he was a threat, a random passenger, or a shadow of Al-Masri's own paranoia. But in those seconds, the agents had felt the pulse of danger more acutely than ever before. Eitan exhaled silently and mouthed a single word to Yael. "Steady." She mirrored him, folding her newspaper just so, her eyes never leaving Al-Masri. The moment of near disruption. had passed, but it left a lingering sense of fragility. The operation was still intact, yet the agents now knew how thin the line between success and disaster could be. They returned to their silent observation. Every movement of al-Masri, every slight adjustment of his belongings, became even more critical. They had learned one crucial lesson in that brief encounter. Patience could not falter, and invisibility was their only armor. 3 hours, they reminded themselves. 3 hours to roam. 3 hours to wait, watch, and prepare for the moment when surveillance would turn into action. And somewhere between Milan and the Eternal City, the tension was building toward a single, irreversible point, a point that could change everything. The Italian countryside had dissolved into urban sprawl as the train approached Florence. Inside carriage 7, the air felt heavier, charged with the quiet electricity of impending action. Yael and Eitan had rehearsed this moment countless times in simulations, yet nothing could fully replicate the unpredictable tension of a live operation. Every heartbeat seemed amplified, every breath a countdown. Al-Masri remained oblivious, absorbed in his notebook, jotting coded messages with meticulous care. His satchel rested between his knees, guarded instinctively, yet vulnerable. The Mossad had waited for months for this window, and now, with the train barreling toward Rome, the moment to act had arrived. Yael's hand brushed the edge of the newspaper, activating the micro-camera to capture a closer angle on the satchel. Eitan shifted slightly, signaling the external support team. Through the discreet vibration in her wristwatch, the van outside had eyes on every carriage door, every platform along the route. Coordination had to be perfect. One wrong step could expose everything. As the train curved into a tunnel, darkness briefly engulfing the carriage, Yael leaned subtly toward Al-Masri. She kept her movements minimal, imperceptible to anyone not trained to notice. In her mind, the operation had 3 phases: observation, isolation, and execution. Observation was complete. Isolation had begun. The first critical move was psychological. Eitan let out a carefully timed cough, loud enough to draw the attention of Al-Masri, but casual enough to seem natural. Al-Masri flinched, looking up with a flicker of unease. The agents had created a minor disruption, just enough to make him shift slightly, repositioning his satchel for comfort, but in doing so, revealing a hidden compartment previously obscured from view. Yael's eyes narrowed. The satchel contained what the Mossad suspected: encrypted documents and a small communication device used for coordinating cells across Europe. The proof of Al-Masri's network right there within reach. Timing was critical. Too early, and Al-Masri could react violently. Too late, and the train would reach Rome before the operation concluded. Yael's pulse synchronized with the subtle vibration from Eitan. The external team was in position. The support van would block the platform at Rome, ensuring the target couldn't escape once the train arrived. With a swift, practiced motion, Yael triggered the small containment tool, a device designed to immobilize the satchel without drawing attention. In milliseconds, the satchel was secured. Al-Masri's eyes widened slightly, but the device's subtlety prevented panic. Eitan moved simultaneously, standing to block any sudden movement and guiding the operation to its next phase. The train's final stretch into Rome blurred past windows, carrying everyone closer to the culmination. For the first time in months of planning, Yael felt the adrenaline shift from anticipation to action. Every second counted. The operation ignited not with violence, but with precision, patience, and the quiet effectiveness of invisible hands. By the time the train slowed into Termini station, the Mossad had achieved what seemed impossible. The target contained, the mission intact, and the world oblivious to the silent chess game that had just unfolded over hundreds of miles. The train rolled into Rome's Termini station with a gentle screech of brakes, blending seamlessly into the hum of everyday commuters. To anyone watching, it was just another high-speed arrival. Tourists with rolling suitcases, office workers rushing to meetings, street performers weaving through the crowd. Yet inside carriage 7, the air remained thick with the residue of tension, the silent echo of an operation flawlessly executed. Yael and Eitan rose as if stretching after a long journey, folding their newspapers and adjusting their jackets. Al-Masri remained seated, bewildered but restrained, his satchel now secured with invisible precision. The Mossad had acted swiftly and silently, neutralizing the threat without alerting the train, the staff, or the public. Months of surveillance, months of planning, had reached this brief, decisive moment. Outside, the support team moved like ghosts. An unmarked van had been positioned near the exit, its doors open and engines idling. As soon as the train doors opened, operatives in plain clothes subtly guided Al-Masri toward the van. He was compliant but confused, his instincts warning him that something was happening, though he could not pinpoint what. Every detail had been accounted for: the paths, the timing, even the distractions of ordinary passengers, to ensure zero suspicion. Yael and Eitan followed at a casual distance, merging with the crowd as naturally as any traveler. Their disguises remained intact, every movement a testament to training, patience, and psychological precision. For an outside observer, they were simply two strangers leaving a train in Rome. For those who knew, they were the culmination of one of the Mossad's most daring and precise operations, sitting just seats away from a high-value target for hours, waiting for the perfect moment, and executing it without a trace of chaos. Once Al-Masri was secured inside the van, the agents split seamlessly, each taking a different route back into the city. Surveillance cameras, busy commuters, and the chaos of Termini station provided cover for their disappearance. Months of planning, endless hours of observation, and meticulous coordination had led to a single, almost cinematic resolution. And now, like shadows at dawn, the agents melted back into the world they had temporarily paused. Back at a safe house on the outskirts of Rome, Yael removed her glasses and let herself exhale. Eitan poured 2 cups of coffee, the ritual grounding them after the tension of the past hours. "It's done," he said quietly. "No mistakes. No witnesses." Yael nodded, her eyes reflecting the weight of what had just occurred. They had achieved a mission that few could even imagine, neutralizing a target without ever firing a shot, without ever raising suspicion, and without compromising their identities. The world would continue oblivious, as if nothing extraordinary had happened aboard that train to Rome. And yet, they knew the truth. In the quiet aftermath, amidst the hum of Rome's streets and the distant rumble of traffic, they understood the delicate balance they walked, the line between observation and action, between invisibility and consequence, between life and death. For Mossad, this was another day, another mission completed. For the world, it would remain a story untold, a secret held by shadows moving silently through the heart of a city that never sleeps.